Welcome. A research focus in my lab is to use ecological principles to explore the restoration of degraded landscapes, including chaparral. And I'd like to give a shout out to my graduate students who have put tremendous energy and creativity into this project. It also offers an opportunity to broaden participation of diverse undergraduate students in the process of research as well as in the development of relationships with the land. Now, why do we need to do restoration in chaparral? And one of the reasons is that many of the species that are endemic to these chaparral habitats do not regenerate well in the face of altered fire regimes such as we're seeing in Southern California today. In particular, those species that rely on germination from the seed bank after fire to maintain their populations are being driven out of the chaparral environment by short return intervals between fires. So an example of what happens when we have short return intervals can be seen here in Ventura County, where this site used to be dominated by chaparral species and now burned 3 times in less than 20 years and is now dominated by invasive annual grasses. And the result is a landscape dominated by invasive grasses like you see here that is highly ignitable and where there are high rates of soil erosion, poor infiltration during rainfall, low support for pollinators and wildlife, and reduced storage of carbon. The challenge we then face is how to restore biodiversity and ecosystem functioning to these degraded landscapes. And I want to point out that these tend to be very hot, dry parts of the landscape in very steep locations. So the approach that we're taking is to use a diverse mix of species, including classic sage scrub type species and more chaparral type species. Measure a variety of traits, including physiological, morphological, and reproductive traits, and then outplant these species into the landscape. One of the questions we're asking is, does performance of these different plants depend on the traits of the plants themselves or the microhabitat into which they're being planted? And we hypothesize that performance will depend on drought-tolerant traits, and that in fact we'll see better performance by species that are more drought-tolerant. We predict that sage scrub species will generally outperform the more classic chaparral species, particularly in the drier, hotter portions of the landscape, and that they will more quickly suppress the exotic annual grasses in these sites. Another question we're asking is, can these sage scrub species be used as nurse plants beneath which we could establish more of the chaparral or harder to establish species? And we predict that success will depend on the shade tolerance of the outplanted species. For example, into this supposed nurse plant environment, if we plant species that are light demanding, they might do very poorly. By contrast, it's possible that these nurse plants will only be useful for more shade tolerant species like toyon or sugarbush. So the reality is likely to be that we won't go back to the chaparral that was once dominating these landscapes, that in fact, if we want to try to restore them, we must go forward to a new community of plants that is likely to survive in the hotter and drier world that we have created. Thank you.